Hi class, sorry I'm not here today. Let's do a little recap on what we did last class. Last class we talked about Punnett squares. We drew one Punnett square and it had 4 little boxes in them, just like this one right here on the slide. We figured out the genotype of the dad and the genotype of the mom, place it into the box. Dad goes on the top, mom goes on the side to predict what your offspring or what the offspring will look like. Today we are going to talk about drawing 2 Punnett squares. So the reason why we only had to draw 1 Punnett square last class is because we only looked at 1 trait. Today we are going to look at 2 traits. So let's get started. Go ahead and take out your notes, number 31, Dihybrid Crosses. Let's do a little quick review. Number 1, what does DNA contain? DNA contains instructions for making proteins. Number 1, DNA contains the instructions for making proteins. So go ahead and write down what I have underlined on number 1. Instructions for making proteins. All right, on number 2, how is this information carried? It is carried according to the sequence of the nitrogen bases. The answer is in green. On number 2, the answer is in green. Sequence of the nitrogen bases. Remember, nitrogen bases are those 4 letters: A, T, G, and C. All living things use those 4 letters because all living things use the same genetic code. All living things use the same genetic code. Don't forget that. All right, on number 3, define gene. Y'all have defined this word so many times now. Hopefully, y'all memorized it by now. A gene is sequences of DNA used to create proteins. Sequences of DNA used to create proteins is number 3. I will underline that for you. Sequences of DNA to create proteins. Number 3. All right, so we're going to do a quick review from what y'all learned the last class. Number 4, define allele. Allele are different versions of a gene. Number 4, alleles are different versions of a gene. For example, like the pictures on the slide. This person here has green hazel eyes. This person in the middle has blue eyes. And this person over here on the right has brown eyes. So there are different versions of the gene for eye color. Green hazel, blue, and brown. So these are called alleles. All right, so let's move to number 5. Which alleles are always expressed? And the answer is dominant alleles. Remember, dominant means strong, okay? Those are the alleles that want to take charge. It will always, always beat the recessive allele. So number 5, the answer is dominant. And remember, in order for a recessive allele to be expressed, to be shown, it has to have 2 little letters. just like here in subject C. Subject C has two little g's, and therefore it is now white fur. Over here in subject A and subject B, notice it has at least one big G, here and here. Because it has a big G, it beats the little letter. So therefore, subject A has gray fur, and subject B has also gray fur. So on number 6, when would you see a recessive allele being expressed in an organism? It will only be expressed, class, if it is homozygous recessive. Number 6, homozygous recessive. Now remember, the word homozygous, homo, means same, and recessive means little letter, meaning same little letter, just like how you see here, little g, little g. So number 6, homozygous recessive. All right, moving on to number 7 and number 8. Genotype and phenotype. We talked about this last class. Please do not get these mixed up. Genotype, number 7, is the combination of alleles. Just like, for example, little g, or big G, little g, or big G, big G. So remember, those are the letters. Genotype are the letters. And I will write that down to remind you. So here for subject A, the genotype for subject A is big G, big G. The genotype for subject B is big G, little b. The genotype for subject C is little g, little g. The letters. Now let's move on to number 8, phenotype. Remember, phenotype is the physical appearance, okay? How someone looks. So number 8, phenotype, is the physical appearance. For example, like on the slide, so the phenotype for subject A is gray fur. So if you looked at the mouse, you can see that it has gray fur. Subject B, the phenotype is also gray fur because it has big G. Big G beats the little g. Subject C has white fur. These right here are the phenotypes of the subjects. Gray fur, white fur. All right, number 9. How many traits do dihybrid crosses make predictions for? Well, it is called dihybrid. Now the prefix di means two. So if it is a dihybrid cross, it involves making predictions about 2 traits. Number 9, how many traits do dihybrid crosses predict for? 2. Number 9, 2 traits. 2. And because we are dealing with 2 traits this time, we have to draw 2 Punnett squares. 1, 2. So notice at the very bottom right here, please pay attention to my little red dot. So the male, notice that is not just 1 letter, there are 2 letters, G and B. As for the female, the mama, also has 2 letters, G and B. G represents 1 trait, and the letter B represents another trait. So there are 2 traits here. So notice in this Punnett square, there are only G's. And in this Punnett square, there are only B's. Each letter should have its own Punnett square. G's here, B here. So I am going to circle the G's from the dad right here and the G's in the mom right there. As always, dad goes on the top right here. So dad has 2 G's, so 1 G goes here, 1 G goes there. Mom has big G, little g, little g. Just as always, bring down dad's big G, bring mama's big G over, and bring mama's little g over. And this is what you get. Now I'm going to circle the letter B's with this green color. Dad has big B, little b. Mom also has big B, little b. And as always, dad goes on the top, mom goes on the side. So because dad has big B, little b goes on top. Mama has big B, little b right there. Bring down dad's big B's and bring down dad's little b. Bring mama's big B over, bring mom's little b over. Just like that. Alrighty, so let's move on to number 10. What is the most important rule to follow when making predictions for 2 traits? And the most important rule is that there should be 1 box for each trait. So number 10, the answer is in green, 1 box for each trait. 1 box for G's, like in this slide, and 1 box for B's, just like that. So number 10, 1 box for each trait. So let's do some practice problems. It says, what trait will appear in all of the offspring? Remember, offspring means baby. So I made your life a little easy, and I gave you the answers for each of these boxes here. So in this box is all the G's, and in this box are all the B's. If you look down here, dad, which is the male, has big G, and big B, little b. As for the mom, which is the female, she has big G, big B, little b. So dad's big G goes here, mom's big G, which is right here, goes on the side, and the letter B's go on this side, just like how before. So if you look at this box here, notice that each box has a big G. Big G wins always. It beats the little one. It is the dominant allele. So if you look here at the table at the top, big G is solid gray fur. So I already wrote down solid gray fur in each of those boxes. So all of the babies will have solid gray fur. Now over here, 3 babies will have green eyes, but there's 1 little baby that will have blue. So the answer to this question here is solid gray fur. So before we move on to the next problem, we gotta go back and refresh your memory on some math, okay? So number 11 on your notes, it says, in the space below, write a sentence that summarizes how to calculate the fraction, percentage, or number of combinations from the 2 Punnett squares in a dihybrid cross. So today we're going to do a little bit more math. So on your notes, I already wrote down some examples. So let's talk about the fractions. I'm just going to rewrite what I already wrote on there. So for example, I wrote down 2/4 plus 1/4. That equals 3/4. All you do when you add fractions is add 2 plus 1 equals 3. And then the denominator stays the same. So that is 4. Okay? Now, whenever you multiply fractions, that's a little different. So let's look at the one on the board or on your notes. So I have 2/5 times 2/5. In order to get your answer, all you do is you multiply 2 times 2, the top 2 times 2, is 4. And then you multiply the bottom. 5 times 5 equals 25. So that is your answer when you multiply fractions. So let's quickly talk about multiplying percentages. So here on your notes, it says 50% times 25%. Whenever you plug it into the calculator, you don't put in 50 times 25. You have to change it into a decimal form because we are talking about percentages. So for example, 50% times 25, in the calculator, you write 0.0 or 0.50 times 0.25, and you get your answer of 0.125. At the front of class today, you picked up this bright orange paper that says cheat sheet on there. So I was nice, and instead of having you calculate it on your own, I pretty much did the calculations for you. I just wanted to show you this so that you have an idea, or you know and understand how to calculate and multiply percentages as well as multiply fractions. If you are still having trouble, gotta go back to your algebra teacher. Okay, so let's do this problem. It says, how many combinations of genotypes will appear in the offspring? Remember, genotypes are the letters. Please don't forget that. Okay? So let's look at each of these boxes and see how many different combinations of the genotypes are in each Punnett square. So let's look at this one. So in this Punnett square here, I see there is a big G, and a big G, little g, and that's it. So because there's only 2 different combinations, I'm going to write it to the side. Now let's look at this Punnett square here. In this Punnett square, I see big B, I see a big B, and I also see a little b. So there are 3 different combinations. What I do to these 2 numbers, I have to multiply them. 2 times 3 is equal to 6. So the answer to this question is 6 different genotype combinations. I also wrote the answer here as well. If you have any questions, please ask your neighbor, help your neighbors out, class, since I am not there today. Okay, so let's work on this one. This one says, how many combinations of phenotypes will appear in the offspring? So now we are talking about phenotypes. Remember, the phenotypes are the looks. So this time I was nice again, and I have already showed you all of the different phenotypes here in the Punnett squares. So let's look at this Punnett square with the G's. In this Punnett square, there is solid gray fur, solid gray fur, solid gray fur, and a striped gray fur. So there are only 2 different phenotypes in this Punnett square, so I wrote it right there. In this Punnett square, notice there are green eyes and blue eyes. So there are only 2 different phenotypes in this Punnett square. So what you're going to do, you're going to multiply, just like what it says there. Multiply 2 times 2, 2 times 2, which equals 4. So the answer to this problem is 4 combinations of phenotypes. It is important that you look at what they are asking for, if they're looking for genotypes or phenotypes. Okay, so let's do a problem with fractions this time. It says, what fraction of the offspring will have striped fur and green eyes? So this one's very specific. It is only asking for striped fur and green eyes. So in this Punnett square right here, it is talking about the fur color. In this Punnett square here, it is talking about the eye color. You got to use this table right here. So because the question is asking about striped fur, which is in this Punnett square, striped fur is little g. So in order for a baby to be striped fur, it has to have two little g's. Little g, little g. So if you look here, in this Punnett square, there are two boxes with little g, little g. So that is 2 out of 4, but you can simplify that to 1/2. And then it is also asking for green eyes. So green eyes, if you look at the table, is a big B. So if any of the boxes have a big B, the baby will have green eyes. So here, this one has a big B, this one has a big B, this one has a big B. So there's 3 boxes with a big B and have green eyes. So 3 out of 4 boxes have green eyes. So what you're going to do to those two numbers, 1/2 and 3/4, you are going to multiply them. And just like how I showed you earlier, you multiply the top together. 1 times 3 equals 3. And 2 times 4 equals 8. So the answer is 3/8. You multiply the top together and you multiply the bottom together to get 3/8. Once again, if someone next to you seems confused or unsure of how I got the answer, please help them out. Alright, so the last problem is dealing with percentages. It says, what percentage of the offspring will have solid gray fur and blue eyes? So the two traits that we only need to worry about is solid gray fur and blue eyes. In this Punnett square here are only G's. The G's represents the color of the fur. And in this Punnett square here represents the eye color. B's. So in order for an offspring to be solid gray fur, it has to have a big G right here. Now, if any of the boxes has a big G, it is solid gray fur. So let's look at that. So there are only 2 boxes with a big G. So therefore, the percentage of this Punnett square having solid gray fur is 50%. So now let's look at the box for eye color. So we're only worried about blue eyes. So let's see here. Blue eyes is little b. So in order for a baby to have blue eyes, it must have 2 little b's. And so looking at this Punnett square, I see 2 boxes with 2 little b's. And that is also 50%. So what are you going to do with those 2 percentages? You are going to multiply them. But because I gave you the cheat sheet, which is that bright orange paper, what is 50% times 50%? And you should find the answer to be 25%. On the back of your notes, do not worry about the back page of your notes. We will complete it together next class. Please behave. Go ahead and take out your independent practice. Go ahead and take out your independent practice, understanding dihybrid crosses. It is due today. Independent practice is due today. Notice on your independent practice, I did number 1, 2, and 3 together, or for you already, so you can reference that. You need to complete 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, as well as the bottom part. The bottom half of that independent practice, use your cheat sheet, that orange paper, to answer the bottom part, for the percentages at least. On the back, you can use your QR reader. Let me go ahead and write that down on this slide so you know if you want to download it. It is called QR Reader. It is free if you want to download it. All you have to do is scan the little QR code and it will show you step by step how to complete that, how to answer those questions.